Before I go into verse 7, I want to iterate something that is of such importance, something of grand importance. I have met missionaries who have given their lives on the mission field. I have met people who have lost it all on the mission field. But if you were to even hint to them that they had somehow given some great sacrifice to God, they would become nauseous. And I mean that. Because God is the rewarder. No one can outgive God because God is no man's debtor. You cannot outgive Him. You cannot be kinder. You cannot be more faithful. You cannot be more generous. You cannot be more selfless than God. Like one preacher told me one time, you got a little shovel, God's got a big shovel. You shovel it out, He shovels it in, His shovel shovels more than your shovel. And I have seen that. I have seen that. Over and over and over again. So many stories that I could just right now tell you that God has worked for me. So many testimonies of His faithfulness in our mission. So many times Him coming through at the last hour in unbelievable deliverance. So many times. I set myself many years ago to follow the example of Georg Mueller. Because as in his day, he desired to show people that God would meet the needs of a ministry, even if that ministry never made their needs known to a single man. And we have set upon ourselves to do that very same thing. In all the days of my life that I have practiced this, not one time has God failed. Not one time. We were in tears this evening talking about God's faithfulness in the mission because if some of you know of Georg Mueller, he would present a presentation twice a year, once a year, about how God met all their needs. Now, he would never make that presentation when they were in the midst of a trial, because he didn't want people to see that they had needs and then be motivated to give. He would always wait until the trial was totally over and the victory was won. About 2 months ago, for the first time in my life, I sat down in my office and I felt God say, okay, now, right. Tell right from this day forward of my faithfulness. That was in November. We support almost 90 missionaries and their families. And we tell no one our need. In November, the moment he told me to start writing, support stopped. It stopped. We were at the 25th day of November and not one missionary on the field had been paid. The staff had not had salaries for a month. And yet not one staff member went hungry. Not one staff member failed to pay a bill. As a matter of fact, all of us got together and figured out that somehow we prospered more without getting a paycheck than when we got one. And then started coming, and God met every need of every missionary. He has never one time failed. Never one time in all these years. Do you know how many missionaries, 90 missionaries and their families? Do you know what that requires? And do you know that God has met it every month, every year, and never one time has He failed? Never once having to call, never once telling someone our need, and then all of a sudden people just start giving. Go out to the mailbox after receiving almost nothing and the mailbox is filled. God has never failed. Never failed. So many times I have sat there in my office, I have cried, I have grumbled, I have doubted, I have been miserable, so many things, not trusting my God. And in spite of my lack of faith, He has never failed. This is not about the faith of some super spiritual saint. It is about some weak, grumbling little child who can't even learn one lesson about faith, and yet God never fails. Can't you trust a God like that? Can't you begin to trust a God like that? And I have a little plaque in my office that said, God gives the best to those who leave the choices up to Him. Can't you trust God with your finances? Can't you trust God with your needs? Some of you want different things and need different things, and you go in debt to get them when only if you would have waited upon God, He might have provided that very thing for you without cost. You see, this is not just something that's dealing with missionaries. This is about every aspect of our life. I mean, praying for shoes. And last week, someone bought me these shoes. Do you see what I'm saying? Every need of yours, lift it up in prayer. Every need of yours into prayer. God so much appreciates, so much loves. Prayer is so much a part of who God is. Why? Why? Prayer to me is like singing in a round. You know what singing in a round is? You know, sing hallelujah to the sing hallelujah to. When you sing something and sing it back. Singing in a round. That's the way I see prayer. Someone asks, well, how does the sovereignty of God and prayer and all that work together? Well, I'm going to explain it all to you right now. This is the way I look at it in a simple, childlike way. God sings to me a prayer. In His sovereignty, there is something that He wants me to ask Him for so that He can get glory out of giving it. And so He sings to me a prayer so that He will lead me into praying a prayer that I will pray back to Him and that He will answer. Well, why doesn't God just give it? Because He wants double glory. See, if I didn't pray for it and He just gave it, I would give Him glory for giving it. But not only do I give Him glory for giving it, I give Him glory for answering prayer. Singing it around. I had a friend, Herb Williams, and I love him so dearly. You know, when I get around a bunch of Calvinists and they start bad-mouthing Arminians, I just think about old Herb. He loves God more than I think I ever will, and he's as Arminian as he can be. And if that offends some of you, well, you can just get glad in the same pants you got mad in. But I remember one time he wanted a guitar. He prayed for 6 months. And one day he walked out at like 8 in the morning, getting ready to go to the ministry. We all worked in the street ministry. And he opened the door, and there on the porch was a guitar. You say highly impractical. Everything my God does is highly impractical. You see, one of Georg Mueller's greatest desires was that people would see the ministry that God had given him, and that those people would trust him, would trust God to meet their daily needs, would trust God to take them by the hand and lead them. My greatest desire for Heart Cry is not missions. It's really not. The main purpose of Heart Cry, and God would never allow me to do it before, would be to tell people He never fails. And the wonderful thing about it is that spiritually, I am a loser. If you only knew what I really am. If you only knew how much I whine, how much I doubt, how much I'm faithless. If you only knew the times I can't even have a quiet time. I can't even get up enough gumption to read my Bible for 2 days. I know most people don't want to hear that because they want to honor men more than they should. And people get mad at me for saying that. It's true. I have trouble obeying. I mean, you know, I'm talking about theology. I'm still working on trying to figure out how to love my wife. I can't think of one reason except that He set His seal upon His children to do them good. You see, one day when I get to heaven, Brother Jennings is not going to come up and throw his arm around me and say, I want to glorify God by telling you all the wonderful things Paul Washer did for him. He's going to throw his arm around me and say, I want to glorify God by telling you all the wonderful things that God did for Paul Washer. You see the difference? You see how twisted we can become? Well, if I can only reach this spiritual level, if I could only learn to pray this way, then yeah, God would do that too in my life. That is just stupid. Do you know what my most powerful prayer is? The most powerful prayer, when I'm in trouble, when I have to pull out the big guns. You know what my most powerful prayer is? The one that gives me most comfort at 3 o'clock in the morning in the dark? This. Lord, you know, I'm going to bed now because you know. You know. creep into the bedroom and try to wake up and say, how goes it? Woman, he knows. Let's go to bed. Oh, he's so good. I glory. I know this is going to go. Just listen to me before you throw a stone. I glory in my weakness. I glory. I don't want to say in my sin because that just sounds so theologically wrong. But if God can get glory out of my darkness,